Thank you so much. Thanks for having us here, and thank you to President Grimson and to Iceland for hosting us. I'm here to talk about the recent release of the Department of Defense's Arctic strategy, but before I get there, I think it's important to note where we've gathered today. Everyone that comes to Iceland recognizes its strategic location. What's also profound is the role it has played in building international law. In the mid-20th century, Iceland was faced with growing pressure from foreign fishing fleets in its waters. Its lifeblood, the fish that sustained its people, was at risk. And Iceland made a bold decision to extend control over its seas from the traditional 12 nautical miles to then 50 to eventually 200. What began as a matter of survival became a turning point in international maritime law. In doing so, Iceland pioneered the exclusive economic zone, an idea that reshaped global thinking on the rights and responsibilities of nations over their coastal waters. It became central to the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, which upholds that seas should be managed fairly and sustainably for all. This lesser-known history is a powerful example of how a small nation, committed to protecting its own community, helped shape the rules-based international order we rely on today. It also underscores that it's not the size of a country, but rather its ability to contribute to a fair and cooperative global system. Together, we in this room form a shared community in Arctic security, and thanks goes to Iceland and President Grimson for continuing to foster it. This trip to Iceland is part of our intent to visit each of our Arctic allies following the release of the 2024 DOD Arctic strategy. We put out this new strategy in large response to the dramatic changes in the environment in the past 5 years. Our message is one of stability and common cause, premised on the notion that security of the United States is possible when we have collective security in a system of international norms. We make it clear that our primary goal is to ensure the Arctic is a secure and stable region, one in which we work in concert with our allies and partners to ensure the US homeland and vital national interests are safeguarded. Our strategy is anchored around 3 lines of effort. We call them the 3 E's. First, enhancing our ability to understand and operate in the environment. Second, engaging with our allies and partners. And third, exercising calibrated presence in the region. Our Arctic allies and partners are the centerpiece and integral to all that we're doing in implementation. I'll share a few highlights of those efforts, but this is just the beginning. An immense amount of opportunity exists for us to deepen collaboration. First, in enhancing capabilities. Within the Department of Defense, we're expending a significant effort to decide where we should invest, including in communications architectures, missile defense, platforms, and equipment. Many of these same conversations are happening in tandem in the capitals of Arctic allies and partners. Sweden and Finland's accession to NATO has further ignited these efforts, and we must seek to leverage one another. Some of these ideas are already coming to light. Just take last week's ambitious security framework signed by the US, UK, and Norway to share technology in the High North. Or this summer's first of its kind joint Norwegian-US space launch to bring Arctic communications for our forces to the region. And while the Coast Guard is not part of the DOD, icebreakers remain crucial to our national security. The recent icebreaker collaboration effort between Canada, Finland, and the US will help catalyze their construction. These are just a few of the kinds of partnerships we're hoping to cultivate going forward. Next, there's an opportunity in how we collaborate. In June, in DC, we hosted an Arctic security policy roundtable, bringing together my counterparts from the Arctic allies to create a roadmap for working together. We also continue to lean into the Ted Stevens Center, the DOD's newest regional center on Arctic and climate security. They play a critical role in convening diverse stakeholders from allies, partners, experts, and indigenous community members to discuss the many lenses of Arctic security. But perhaps, most importantly, one of our greatest opportunities is in creating a shared understanding of the threat environment. During visits across Alaska and to Arctic allies, we've heard loud and clear that there is a strong alignment on the evolving threats to security. First, there's a deep appreciation for the threat of climate change. And certainly in North America, where thawing permafrost, coastal erosion, and increased wildfires all challenge our ability to operate and sustain infrastructure. We also hear shared concerns about our adversaries' intentions in the region, which impact our collective security. Despite attrition from Ukraine, Russia continues its expansion and modernization of military infrastructure in the Arctic. Collective security is built on trust, and Russia's unprovoked war in Ukraine has not only disrupted traditional governance mechanisms, but also eroded trust. Meanwhile, the People's Republic of China, while not an Arctic nation, is seeking to alter Arctic governance in its favor through increased access and influence by a slate of economic, diplomatic, scientific, and military activities. Over the last decade, the PRC has doubled its investments in the Arctic, but there are often strings attached. including the guise of scientific research for military purposes, and to gain a foothold in the Arctic for future resources and strategic advantage. This brings me to some other challenges we're seeing, including a significant increase in hybrid threats. While not kinetic, they threaten our security as an Arctic nations and as an alliance. They include disinformation, threats to undersea cables, suspicious drone activity, channeling of migrants, and GPS jamming, which I personally experienced last month while flying in northern Norway. One important development that has been eye-opening to our European partners is the growing cooperation between Russia and the PRC on the Indo-Pacific side of the Arctic. These threats are happening across multiple domains. Last summer, PRC and Russian warships operated near US territorial waters in Alaska. Just 2 weeks after we released our Arctic strategy this summer, 2 PRC and 2 Russian bombers conducted an unprecedented flight on the edge of Alaska. And just 2 weeks ago, we saw Chinese and Russian Coast Guard vessels operating in the Bering Sea, conducting a joint Coast Guard patrol. These operations are not accidental. They are meant to send a signal. So I'll close with a simple message. The Arctic is a bridge that connects North America, Europe, and the Indo-Pacific. For those allies and partners in Europe and the Indo-Pacific who seek to uphold our values and the international rules-based order, we must work together. But it also means that we must look beyond just defense. We must look to diplomacy. We must look to economics, and we must look to science. Security is not only a defense mission, it's a whole of society mission to maintain our values. All of us, small and large, have a role to play in our collective security. When working together, we can ensure we uphold a peaceful, cooperative, and prosperous Arctic today and into the future. Thank you again for the invitation.
Well, thank you very much indeed.